Our next project is going to be based off of nature's complexities. Now, what I mean by that is that you are going to choose your subject matter based on your interest in its surface, in its details, in its oddities. Um, and that alone, you're not necessarily thinking about anything deeper other than you're interested in its form, the way it captures light, just something that you find really visually stimulating. An artist who has really mastered this idea is Vija Selmans. Um, I know a few of you in this class actually got to see the recent exhibition she had at SF MoMA, which is a retrospective of her work. She did many graphite drawings that are very, very detailed renditions of surfaces of water, rocks, the moon, also stars in the sky. And, you know, each one, she doesn't just kind of one off think, okay, that's interesting. She draws the subject matter repeatedly. And these actually, when you see them, they're the scale of a normal drawing. Actually, they're drawing on paper most of the drawings are on paper very similar size to what you might use, like an 18 by 24 sheet. And it's just incredible to see the detail that is put into each one of these drawings. And like I said, that it's not just that she does the subject matter once, she does it repeatedly over and over again until she feels like she loses interest in that subject matter. And, she talks about the idea that she feels like she had a personal connection and interest to that subject matter and that she's trying to translate that to the viewer. So the attention and detail that she shows, like the excitement that she gets from really working through the detail of that subject matter, she hopes that that will translate to the viewer. And like I said, most of the time they're very mundane, everyday subject matter. She did a series on spider webs done in charcoal, a series of the clouds done in graphite, series of just rocks on the ground. And the interesting thing to me is that I think we've all found ourselves captured in that moment where you just find yourself looking and thinking about the details of something. And she is really capturing that idea in a drawing that, as you'll see in our discussion post, can sometimes take her days or weeks or months or years to complete. Also, constellations in the sky are kind of a common subject matter of Vija Selmans. We can't talk about nature's complexities without mentioning Leonardo da Vinci. Thorough, detailed study of objects in nature is really one of the great interests of Renaissance artists, and it's comes out of this humanist idea of believing that studying something artistically is equal to scientific study of that object. And I think now there's a lot of talk about that idea of STEAM, versus STEM, where the arts is equivalent to the sciences in the way that you are really detailed thinking and studying a subject matter. And Renaissance artists truly believe that. They truly believe that you could only fully understand an object by really sitting and drawing it and thoroughly looking at it. That was an aspect of studying it. And you'll see that actually in a lot of Da Vinci's drawings. When you look into his sketchbook, oftentimes there's scientific notes right next to a very detailed drawing of the object. So it's something to think about. And I think, probably each of you have had that experience. Once you've drawn something, you feel like you really know and understand that object. One last artist we're going to look at here before you start thinking more about your project, and that artist is Jane Kim. She was actually here on Chabot's campus and gave a talk just before the pandemic hit, and I think a few of you were there actually to see her talk and talk about her work. She is her background comes from that of a scientific illustrator, meaning she was formally trained and has worked in projects that were actually about scientific illustration. So, really making those illustrative drawings in textbooks. A lot of times you don't think about that as being the job of an artist, but it is, sometimes mapping out those drawings is a very important role of an artist. I know my first ever art job was working as an illustrator for an archaeological project because they consider that part of their scientific study, that they have to have very detailed, realistic, and realistically correctly drawn objects for their study. And it's something, if you're ever interested in, it's a really fun job to do. I know I was once able to spend a summer in Greece doing it, so it's making art and getting to see really interesting things at the same time. But anyway, so I got off topic there. Jane Kim's work, she is really interested in very carefully looking at objects in nature. A lot of her work is about, realistically capturing them, less so for scientific purposes, but to actually get people to think and look about the world around them and how climate change is affecting those plants and species. So now, instead of doing small scale illustrations for scientific literature, she's doing huge murals to bring public understanding to the plants or species that are being affected by climate change. So you can see there, a lot of her murals are huge. She goes all around the country creating her murals, usually with they're based on sort of a specific species that is endangered in that area. Although she is based here in the Bay Area, actually out of Pacifica right now. I think her studio is based, called Inkdwell. So your project that you're doing is that you are going to pick a subject matter. It's open-ended to what you are interested in. Look around you for inspiration. Maybe it's a cluster of rocks in your yard. Maybe it's a section of foliage as you're walking through the park. Maybe it's complex branching patterns of trees. Whatever you find visually engaging. It could be something that you see every day that you really stare at. It could be something that you find while you're on a hike. It could be just little patches of grass that you look at every day that has a interesting pattern to it. Once you pick your subject, you want to sit there and draw it, doing some little thumbnail sketches, thinking about some of the most challenging attributes of your subject matter. Your 6 thumbnails could be all of the same subject, just in different ways. You could, if you're unsure of what you want to do, your 6 thumbnails could be 6 different things that you're trying to, determine which one you want to do. But you're just going to be using those as a brainstorming technique to figure out what you want to do for your final project. Remember, the thumbnails are only small, little 2-3 inch sections. You can also work from a photograph, like once you have your composition mapped out, if you want to take a photograph of what you're thinking about to help you as you draw back at home or in the studio. Um, I would suggest doing the thumbnails right then and there while you're looking at it, because sometimes, especially if you just have like a dinky little cell phone camera, sometimes it doesn't pick up the same details that you see as you're sitting there looking at it. Like the colors change, the values change. It just doesn't look the same in a photograph. That's kind of the amazing part of being able to sit there in front of it and draw. So, that is what we are going to be working on this week. We're going to brainstorm and start the drawing. The actual finished drawing isn't due until next week. We are going to continue this project by actually doing an abstraction of this drawing, so just keep that in mind. There'll be more information on that later.